Is Iraq becoming a proxy battleground between Washington and Tehran? Angry protesters stormed the US embassy in Baghdad. That's after the US attacked an Iranian-backed paramilitary group. So how can this latest tension be contained? This is Inside Story. Hello there, warm welcome to the programme. I'm Julie MacDonald. Dramatic scenes at the US Embassy in Iraq. Supporters and members of the Iranian-backed popular mobilization forces surrounding the US Embassy compound in Iraq's capital, Baghdad. Their demand, an end to American intervention in the country. They threw rocks and set fires outside. Security personnel responded with tear gas. The US then deployed Marines to secure the compound before the protesters' leaders told them to withdraw. President Donald Trump blames Iran for the demonstrations, but Tehran's denying being involved at all. There's widespread anger over recent US airstrikes against the Hezbollah Brigades in Syria and in Iraq. The US says they were launched in retaliation to a rocket attack on Friday near Kirkuk. That killed an American civilian contractor. Well, we'll talk to our guest shortly. But first, our reporter Simona Fulton brings us up to date.
We are in front of the checkpoint that leads towards the US Embassy behind us, and this is now the second day where hundreds of fighters and supporters from the Popular Mobilization Forces have besieged the US Embassy. They have once again set fires to the outer gates. Perhaps you can see the smoke rising behind me, and for now they are refusing to leave. We're seeing increased security presence today with Iraqi security forces actually manning the checkpoint, which was not the case yesterday when these crowds were allowed to march on the US Embassy, but they're still allowing them to go through, and for now these crowds are refusing to leave. The US guards inside the US Embassy are deploying tear gas to try to manage these crowds, and as we understand, negotiations are currently ongoing between the leadership of the Popular Mobilization Forces and the government to see whether these crowds are willing to leave. Of course, Prime Minister Adel Abdel Mahdi has called on them to depart yesterday, but they seem to have simply ignored his orders. They have camped out overnight. They have put up flags on top of the fence of the US Embassy, and it remains to be seen whether they will withdraw today. Of course, any withdrawal of these crowds here would have to happen on the terms of the Popular Mobilization Forces. Their very presence here was a very powerful show of defiance, a sign that they're capable of marching on the US Embassy, and it is clear that the Popular Mobilization Forces and their leaders are the ones currently calling the shots on whether or not this standoff here at the US Embassy will end. Simona Fulton, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
So let's bring in our guests. Ahmed Rushdie is Senior Foreign Policy Advisor for the Speaker of the Iraqi Parliament. He joins us from Baghdad. Mohammed Marandi is Head of North American Studies at the University of Tehran, and he joins us from Tehran. Ismail al-Sudani is former Iraqi defense attaché to the United States and a retired Iraqi brigadier general. He joins us by Skype from Manassas in the US state of Virginia. Gentlemen, a very warm welcome to you all. Ahmed Rushdie, if I can start with you. These are frankly extraordinary pictures that we see out of Baghdad. From your perspective, what story do they tell the world?
Well, it tells the world so many messages. It tells the world is that there is a real problem between Washington and Tehran. And it tells the world is that there are a real problem inside the local politics in Iraq, and there is a real misunderstanding between the Iraqi government and the Hashid leaders. And also, it's a very important message is that still Iraqis does see all those images not profitable for their demands. It's not accurate for their demands, which is rising up the the way of their demands. It's actually making reforms about the whole political system, and also the real ordinary demands like electricity, like services, like lowering the unemployment and so on. So all these messages have been seen for those 2 days, and let us not forget it gives a bad messages about Iraq itself in front of the world.
Mohammed Morandi, from your perspective, what story do these pictures tell? I mean, we've heard the reaction from Iran, calling the US attempt to blame it for the protests audacious.
I think the biggest problem that the United States has, and it's not only limited to Iraq, is its arrogance. The fact that the Americans can bomb Iraqi forces and murder dozens of Iraqi soldiers, heroes who are fighting against ISIS, alongside the border with Syria, some of them inside Syria, which was very far away from the base where the Americans claimed that they were involved in some attack. And again, even that is problematic. The Americans are both judge, jury, and executioner. So the Americans show no regard for Iraqi sovereignty. They attack Iraqi war heroes, and they have no respect for the Iraqi government. And that is the story of the United States' presence in this part of the world for many decades now. And for the Americans to call these people, or pundits to say Iranian-backed or Iranian, these are Iraqis with Iraqi ID cards, and they are the ones who pushed back ISIS, the very same ISIS that the United States and its allies helped to create. When we look at the
But on that note, Mohammed Morandi, but on that note, we have heard from people at the embassy, and they're saying that they're completely separate to the peaceful protest movement, which has never gone to the embassy. They say they're completely separate, that the people at the embassy belong to the PMF, and they have a completely different agenda that, as Ahmed Rushdie pointed out, actually detracts from what they want, which is wholesale political change.
Well, we have to keep in mind that the whole problem that Iraq has been caused by the United States. The United States created the monster Saddam Hussein. They gave him chemical weapons to use against even his own people. They then attacked the country. Then they imposed sanctions on the country where over 1 million people died. Then they invaded the country. They destroyed the country's infrastructure and occupied it. And even now, the U.S. embassy is the size of a country. This is not the embassy of a friend of Iraq. This is the embassy of an occupier. So when the United States tries to prevent Iran and Iraq from having normal ties, when it manipulates the country, when the United States and others help support extremist groups in Syria and then they spill over into Iraq, the United States is not in a position to complain about Iran or Iraq or anyone else. And what goes on near the embassy, no one in Iran is going to believe the American narrative. The fact is that many Iraqis are outraged that the Americans murdered soldiers that belong to the Iraqi armed forces that helped save the country. And these people who are at the embassy, their brothers in arms were murdered by the Americans. So somehow, if they say they are Iranian-backed, killing them makes it more acceptable in the eyes of Western pundits and think tanks. They were pretty pleased when Western think tanks were pretty pleased when the Americans bombed these people and killed these people. And as I said, they were nowhere near the base that the Americans claim that this group was behind.
Ismail al-Sudani, let me bring you in on this. Is American arrogance, as our guest pointed out there, part of this picture? I mean, how much of a blow is it for the Americans to have these pictures of their embassy, frankly, under siege, beamed around the world? I mean, doesn't it show a weakness in foreign policy or strategy, if there is one?
Well, I think your guest in Tehran has made his own perspective from his own side. He is blaming America, of course. That is the official Iranian point of view. But as an Iraqi and have served in Iraq, in the Iraqi army for almost 30 years. You know, the picture should be more comprehensive. I think Iran and Iraq are Iran and America are, contributing negatively in reaching this point, unfortunately. Those countries are having their own conflict, and they would like to fight each other on Iraqi soil. And this is the fact. Unfortunately, he's talking about United States is not respecting the Iraqi sovereignty, the Iraqi government. And I really would like him to see the picture in Iraqi perspective rather than his own perspective. Iraqis are also fed up from the Iranian proxies who are, controlling on everything. And in your report just now, we have heard that the Iraqi government is negotiating with the Hashd al-Shabi, with the PMUs, Popular Mobilization Forces, in order to them to leave their positions in front of the embassy. I am wondering where is Iran would accept their forces and with their official fatigue and uniform to protest against any diplomatic or foreign mission in Tehran. I don't think so they would be accepting this, So the government is negotiating and security apparatuses which is belong to it and should order them to leave the place without any condition. This is the way if they respect the Iraqi sovereignty and respect the Iraqi government. Unfortunately, it is very sadly to say that these forces. I don't say that these forces are not sacrificing. I am, I am respecting their sacrifices in their fighting against Daesh and against ISIS, and they have defeated defeated ISIS by their blood and their lives. And
Ismail, let me stop you there just for a second, and I'll come back to Mohammed Marandi to get a response to that in a second. But I want to bring in Ahmed Rushdie, who's obviously in Baghdad. So can you give us the perspective from where you are then? Is Iraq becoming a proxy battleground between Washington and Tehran? And is that the feeling of the Iraqi people, or at least some of them?
Well, actually, let's be frank on that way. It's that there are about 11 attacks done by the PMF, done by Kataib Hezbollah on the American bases. The last one killed about one contractor and wounded dozens of soldiers. And as a reflex, what's happened is that the Americans attack Hezbollah brigade in their camps. And let us not forget also, as per the Secretary of Defense told Adel Abdel Mahdi 4 hours before the attack is that we are fed up, we should make the attack. So it looks like, in a way or another, it's an official attack. And Adel Abdel Mahdi said, I talked to Aspers that just wait, let me talk to the people, let us settling something on that way. Aspers said, no, the decision had been made. So it's all show you that the Iraqi government until now didn't make a real decision about what's happening now. It's even didn't get to be a mediator between the two parts. Now, according to that, it shows you also the reflexes of the people, especially now we have two kind of demonstrators. We have Tahrir demonstrators, and now we have the other demonstrators, which is run by Kataib Hezbollah against the American embassy. And those are the Tahrir Square, they are demonstrators against what's happening in Iraq and against the corruption and bad services and so on. But all those things, I think, it will reflect on the political process in Iraq. It will be reflecting on about choosing the next prime minister, about the early elections, about how to deal with the situation from Iraqi's prospect, about what's going to happen next. So, and let us not forget also is that maybe, just maybe, it pushed the choice of prime minister in a way or another that we need someone who's balancing the relationship between Tehran and Washington. And it's, frankly speaking, this is reality. This is the geopolitics working on. And we need, as Iraqis, we need someone who can handle this situation. From my point of view, I think Adel Abdel Mahdi cannot run such a delicate relationship. We need someone who can move in between. He is willingly to settle the issue between Tehran and Washington. He's willingly to settle some economical and geopolitical issues with Tehran. And let us not forget, they are our neighbors, and they will still our neighbors. So it's still there are so many relationships between Baghdad and Tehran on many aspects, politically, economically, even socially. And also, this man, he should be also have a very good connection with the international community, because we all know Iraq, financially speaking, has many problems. Iraq has debts about $134 billion. And also, Iraq needs the international community for rebuilding issues, for rebuilding and reconstruction of the destroyed areas, and also to fight terrorism. So all those problems need to be settled by the Iraqis rather than proxy Iran, proxy America.
Mohammed Marandi, is one of the difficulties here that there are two very different opposing stories? So the US wants to tell the story that Iran's asserting a vice-like grip over Iraq, and that essentially Iraq's become, if you like, an Iranian colony, whilst Iran maintains that actually it's a partner to Iraq. It wants to help rebuild and support its neighbour. And yet part of the criticism we're hearing today is that this PMF's protest at the embassy is simply an attempt to draw attention away from the peaceful protesters.
I think it's pretty clear, no matter how one frames it, that the Americans have repeatedly bombed the popular mobilization groups, and they've murdered many of them. And the accusations that they've attacked American positions are simply American accusations. There's been no court of law in Iraq that has proven this. And if the popular mobilization supporters and their people do not leave the gates of the US Embassy during negotiations with the Iraqi government, possibly it's because it's linked to the fact that the Iraqi government told the Americans not to bomb them, and they did. So they're not going to sit probably there vulnerable, be prepared to be bombed again, to have their children murdered, to have their relatives murdered, to have themselves maimed and killed, because the Iraqi government is standing weak in front of the United States. So obviously, as human beings, they have the right to feel insecure in their own country. So if the Iraqi government was in control of US forces, I don't think this situation would occur. And on the other hand, it is not Iran that is trying to drive the United States out of Iraq. After all, Iran has no troops in Iraq. Iran is working with a government that was elected through elections. And the United States keeps sanctioning people and governments that even do business with Iran. So it's the Americans who have military bases. It's the Americans who are trying to prevent the normalization of trade. The American, Saudi, Emirati media day and night is carrying out psychological warfare, trying to turn the Iraqi population against Iran. Then you have thousands of NGOs, literally thousands, funded by the United States in Iraq, active. And then, despite all that, the United States behaves with impunity, murders people, takes responsibility, and they expect people not to go and protest. The problem is the US occupation. And it's not just limited to Iraq. Look at Yemen. Look at Libya. Look at what they did in Syria.
Mohammed, let me stop you there just because I want to bring in Ismail al-Sudani to respond to this. Does the US have to conclude, on the basis of what Mohammed just said, that its mission in Iraq has failed? It appears to have no clear vision or strategy. Does it have to conclude that it's spent all this money and failed?
Frankly, I would say that United States is part of what is going on. I didn't deny anything. But when you instigate the United States, of course, United States is going to react. So I think Iran or Iran-backed, forces in Iraq instigated the United States to react. So if Iranian got what they have wanted, in fact, from the reaction. In fact, that is the golden moment for them to condemn what has done by Americans. But on the other hand, we are turning a blind eye for what is going on in the other side. I think what is going on, that Iraqi, state is not a state, is a fragile state. It is not me who is saying that Iraq is a fragile state. And why is Iraq is a fragile state? Because of the political parties who owns armed groups, not only the Shia, but maybe also the Kurds who are having Peshmerga. They don't want a state of law. They don't want a state of equity. They don't want a state is a powerful that would control on each and everything. They want to be above the law. And that's really is pushing from a foreign world. Iraqi government is in a situation or in a position they cannot, react. They cannot do anything towards anything that is happening. And I would ask you this question, or I'll ask any guest: would Iraqi government didn't Iraqi government expected what is going on? What will happen after the bombing of the position of Kataib Hezbollah in Syria and Iraq? Of course, that there should be some security sense to anticipate what will be going. There were many threats from the leadership of the Hajj Shabi to make some reaction against the American. So why the Iraqi government did not reinforce the protection against the American, which are obviously the American embassy in Baghdad in the Green Zone, which is more fortified.
Ismail, let me bring in Ahmed here just for a second, because I want to concentrate also on what the Iraqi people seem to want. So what we're sitting here talking about is a country that appears to have numerous layers of influence, whichever way you look at it, whichever side you are on. The US blames Iran, Iran blames the US, but the peaceful protesters, they want basic services and good governance. How do they get that on the ground in such a complex environment?
Honestly speaking, I don't think such a situation going to help to reform anything. I think the first step now to choose a prime minister that has a real background about what's happening, more or less outside the political blocs, and more or less has a very good knowledge about to get a very good relations with all the partners here in Iraq, which means that Tehran, Washington, and maybe even the Gulf state and Turkey. And on that way, this man or this prime minister or this cabinet can start to make some sort of messages, send some sort of messages of reforming of the economy to the international community, and said, okay, we can start up a little bit of investment, even with what's happening now, just because the new prime minister is accepted by the demonstrators, especially in the South. He will be accepted by the demonstrators in the South. So you can imagine it's a start point, but it does not mean that everything going to be peaceful and everything going to be as it's supposed to be, as calm as it is. Why? Because this prime minister has the, it's supposed to be, has the duty to talk also to the political blocs who should share power with him. And it will end it, and his power will end with the early elections, which maybe it can be on a 6 months or maybe 1 year. Now, all those images that I am saying is actually in the mindset of the Iraqis. Now, they are actually dreaming about it. Now, what's happening now is not helping them. What's happening now is actually making the situation very complex, and eventually it shows you that we have a weak Iraqi government, we have a weak parliament, and also we have a weak political process. So the faith, the Iraqi faith on the political process is going down. So that's why I'm saying is that sending those bad messages to the Iraqis, to the regional countries, to the world, is making a bad picture about Iraq. And I think that's why you are asking this question, is that what's hope that Iraqis will have with this situation?
Thank you, gentlemen, for your fascinating thoughts on this subject area. Well, a big thank you to all our guests, Ahmed Rushdie, Mohammed Morandi and Ismail Al-Sudani. And thank you, of course, to you for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Julie McDonald, and the whole team here. Bye-bye for now.